Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar, Empowering Educators for Inclusive Discussions. I'm Kim Harding, and I'm going to be walking through this topic with you today and hopefully giving you some useful tools to use in your classrooms when we have those moments where we're asked questions or tough situations come up. All right, well, let's get started. Like I said, I am Kim Harding. I am here with you today. We are recording this webinar, so you can go back in, check things out again if you would like. And you will also receive a resource doc that will kind of outline our whole webinar today and allow you to just get a recap of that. And also, it will contain links to any resources that I talk about today, as well as this slide presentation. And with us today, helping out behind the scenes, is Heather, just to make sure things run smoothly. Hi, Heather.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to the webinar.
All right. So today's webinar is sponsored by Teachers Strategy Vault. This is something that teachers can use in their classroom to just have on hand a quick, easy grab to find a strategy to either help get your kids engaged or help you through a situation in your classroom. So this is a really great resource for teachers, and there are just so many ideas there. So each one just comes in a little 5x7 card, and they're just really easy to use and quick to grab, like I said. So there's a link here on this slide to check those out in more detail, but really great thing to put in your toolkit. So I would like to get us started by figuring out who is here today. This will help me understand and to just kind of change my presentation to be more directed toward who is listening right now live. So the poll here, if you want to take it, I would appreciate it.
I'm just waiting for a couple more to come in. All right. So it looks like we have 43% classroom teachers grades 3 to 5, 43% grades 6 to 8, and 14% admin or other.
All right. Thank you very much, Heather. All right. All right, so our goals today are to become more confident about effectively facilitating discussions on challenging topics in your classroom. These can come up at random times, so this will just be a way for you to have a little confidence and approach these in a way that will just roll more easily in your classroom. Another goal is to foster critical thinking and respectful dialogue among the students. And we will get into this a little bit, just about how some direct teaching might need to take place around this, but the importance of that. So we're going to start off talking about spontaneous discussions today, those things that just pop up that we're not really ready for. We're going to talk about planned discussions, as well as going over some strategies that we can use in our classroom to help facilitate these discussions. All right, so spontaneous discussions, dealing with the unexpected. And as classroom teachers, you guys know this happens multiple times a day. Something pops up. But when we're talking about tough topics or topics that you're not sure how to address, there are some tips I'm going to share with you to help you through that. When I was a brand new teacher, here's a little story. Just very fresh into the classroom, just rose-colored glasses on, everything's gonna be great. I'm just super excited. And not too far into my career, I had a student walk up to me and ask me if I knew that eating your boogers made you healthier. And I was floored as a young teacher, and I just kind of stepped back and I was like, okay, what am I going to do? And I didn't know what to do. And I immediately told the kid what I thought, like, we should use a tissue, you know, if we need to clean our nose. And he and I went back and forth for a few minutes. It's not a proud moment for me looking back on it. And we didn't really obviously get into an argument, but he was giving me his reasons why he felt this way. People had told him this, and I was giving him kind of the the science side of it, the medical side of it. But anyway, I walked away from that situation that day as a new teacher feeling like, oh my gosh, like, is that going to keep happening? And it happened many, many, many more times while I was in the classroom. But now I know better, right? So this quote I had to put in here: do the best you can until you know better. Then when you know better, do better. And hopefully today I can kind of bring you this to this knowing better and doing better place. So two things that didn't even cross my mind that day were acknowledging what he said or choosing to engage with him or delay that conversation with him. I just immediately engaged. So knowing now that it's very important to acknowledge anything a student brings your attention to, but then you do have that choice to either engage right away or to delay the conversation. Like, why don't you come see me when we're getting ready for recess or before we transition to lunch? I would love to talk to you about this. That gives you a little bit of time to process this question and not have that knee-jerk reaction to it like I did as a new teacher. So acknowledging the students who raise these unexpected questions or maybe things that are uncomfortable to talk about in your classroom, something controversial, it's still very important that you acknowledge those students. But while you're acknowledging them, you also need to really have your eye on your class and recognize how other people are responding to this. How is it making the other students feel? Because out of your whole group of kids, everyone might react a little differently. So you're definitely going to have differing opinions and different knowledge that they come to the table with. So you need to decide promptly after you're asked one of those spontaneous questions whether to engage in that discussion immediately or schedule it for a later time based on the readiness and the interest. Maybe if it is appropriate to talk about in the classroom, but that readiness can be your students' readiness or it can be your readiness. So having to delay it is perfectly acceptable. So if you're postponing it, you need to suggest ways for students to prepare. So if everyone heard this question being asked, or if it's a question that you have already shared with the class, give them ways to prepare for this, particularly if this is like a really sensitive topic that might get some people riled up or just feeling some big feelings. And it is okay to not proceed. If it's not appropriate, if emotions are too high, then you can seek someone from the outside to come in and help you facilitate that discussion. We can't take it all on as teachers. We can only do our best. So where to start? When you guys get the resources after this webinar concludes today, you are going to have a template in there that you can work through. I'm going to work through parts of that with you today while we're together. And you're going to also get a resource where it gives you an example of one of these inclusive discussions that I have completed. So you can see how it fleshes out and how you can use this template in your classroom. So let's move on to planned discussions. These are things that you see them coming, right? In one way or the other, you know that they are going to be coming up in front of your classroom. So this is a question that I would like to talk about because this question comes up. If you are in upper L, if you are in middle or high, you might get this question, maybe even in the second grade. Why do some people question the existence of climate change? This is a huge question, right? There are people definitely in both camps for this, and this is a question that might come up in our classroom. Well, how do we move through this question and end up in a place where everybody feels heard, everyone is respected, and maybe you even have a deeper understanding? That's the goal. So here are some of the key points to working through this process. You need to identify a clear purpose. So why are you even digging into this question? You need to establish ground rules. So many of you may have already established ground rules around certain things you do in your classroom. And this situation is no different, especially since it can be dealing with students that have heightened emotions or maybe feeling just certain ways about this. You need to try to develop or provide a basis for understanding of the question. Not everyone who's hearing this question being asked might understand it fully or enough to really even get started in having a discussion. Creating a framework to follow. This is something I'm going to share with you, and include everyone in the class. Let everyone who wants to be heard to be heard. Be an active facilitator in this. So this isn't something that you're going to just like teach the kids how to do and send them off on their own, at least right away. In secondary, you might get to that point, but in elementary for sure, this is always something that you're going to need to facilitate. And then while you are going through this process, just summarizing and collecting all of the things that are brought up. So at the end, you can kind of wrap it up, give feedback, and remind them of all of the things you talked about. And then handling issues related to your own identity. So if this question rubs you the wrong way, or if it makes you feel big emotions, we need to be able to step back as teachers, as instructors, to process and handle that as well before we can work through a process with our kids. And then we'll talk about the resources that fit into this. So identifying a clear purpose. This is where we want to start. Why are we having this conversation? Why are we going to choose to go through with trying to answer this question? So you're going to start a discussion with a clearly stated objective to just guide the conversation. And even you can extend that and try to hook it to some of your learning goals in your classroom. So some of the objectives that are for this climate change question. So we would want to try to get to a place where we understand different perspectives of climate change. We want to think about the reasons behind people that are skeptic about it, and then discuss the impact of that skepticism on environmental awareness. So these are objectives that, depending on your grade level, you can come up with your class, like do a discussion, and like where do we want to be at the end of this? And get these objectives clearly stated, maybe posted in your room during this discussion or up on your board. And then after you have those objectives set, you want to establish some ground rules. And this really could make or break your whole discussion, because students need to be in a place where they're going to feel safe in order to tackle something that might be a little bit uncomfortable or just challenges to them in some way. So you're going to collaborate with students to create or modify discussion guidelines. So maybe you already had some, like I said, maybe you take a look at those and how do we need to change these? What would we have to add or take away for this situation? And then ensuring everyone agrees on these before you get started. If everyone is in agreement on how this is going to go, then they're going to buy in more and everyone's going to start off in a really good place. So some discussion guidelines that I've used are listening and being respectful, right? Listen to what others say without interrupting them, and think about their ideas even if you don't agree. So really listen. So you're not just hearing the noise in the room, you are listening to what they're saying and trying to maybe see it from their viewpoint. Focus on ideas. So talk about the reasons people have, but not about the people themselves. So, we don't want kids talking at each other. We want them talking about the ideas that are in front of them. And of course, not being mean or hurtful. So everyone gets to speak. So you need to make sure that everyone who wants a chance gets a chance to speak. And maybe you know your students well enough where some of them are a little bit quieter, but they have things that they like to say, and you can just see it. Like maybe give them just some different questions to motivate them to reach out a little bit with their thoughts. Use facts. So we're not putting feelings into this necessarily. We want to stay factual, just so everyone is getting a true picture of the facts behind this topic. And then be helpful. Try to find answers as a group, not to get in an argument. We want to steer clear of that in every classroom, in every situation. But this situation can kind of lend itself in that direction if we're not careful and if we don't facilitate this group to just work smoothly and be respectful, and then staying on topic. Other topics might pop in, and what I would recommend there is just jotting them down on the board. Say, okay, we're talking about this today, but this is related to it. We don't have time and we're not ready to talk about that now. Let's write it on the board, and maybe we can add that to the end of our discussion, or maybe that can be a whole separate discussion depending on what that topic is. So a common basis for understanding. It's very important that everyone in your classroom, everyone taking part in this discussion, has an understanding about the topic, right? And where people are coming from. They need to understand that people have different perspectives and maybe why they have those perspectives. So you might want to talk about what scientists say, right? So scientists agree that climate change is real and caused by human activities. The skeptics' view, some people are questioning if it's really happening or if humans are even causing it. So they might think just those natural changes in the earth. So just clearing up some of these things to help your students to gain an understanding of the topic that you're talking about. So people could have different political or economic beliefs. They could be worried about fairness or justice, or even cultural beliefs. And then maybe some reasons. Again, we're just building up that understanding. Reasons people might question your topic. So in this case, climate change. Maybe it's a hard topic to understand. Maybe there's a lot of little pieces that are hard to put together. So trying to simplify your topic in a way where they're going to be able to gain an understanding of that. And again, politics and different ideas people come to the table with. School setting, it's oftentimes reflective of what they talk about at home. So you're dealing with that influence there. Could have to do with finances, money matters, what they see on the media, social media, or just the news, if the news is on in their house, and then their own beliefs and feelings that are shared potentially through their family members. So you can use readings, videos. Students contribute materials to trying to establish this understanding of the topic. But you need to really encourage your students to share those key points and be able to think about, is this fact or is it opinion, right? So you have to watch your sources. Where are you getting this information from? And I think in upper L and then on through secondary, you really do talk about your sources, where they come from, right? Your primary, secondary sources. So this could kind of feed into that just while you're trying to guide them into this deeper understanding. And then creating a framework for your discussion that you can actually follow. So getting started, so you can rephrase that question. Why do you think some people aren't sure if it's real? Find some reasons, right? People might question what a scientist says. You can talk about how this topic affects you. Okay, does it matter if people aren't sure if this climate change is real or not, right? And you could do something. Maybe you could reach out to a scientist. Maybe you can talk to others and see what's going on outside of your classroom even. Making a plan, right? So what could people do if this is a real thing? What could they do to care more about the earth? How could we work together? So making a plan as a class, make it just an outreach almost. And then after talking, you can talk about still how people are feeling, how they can see things changing when they're looking into these topics, and then just trying to find a way to understand it and maybe bring that with you into the future, and how once you have this understanding and you have this discussion and you answer these questions, what are you going to do as a person moving forward? So through that whole process, you are posing open-ended questions that encourage discussions, right? Without really steering them. You want them to explore this topic. You want them to explore this question and redirect that discussion if it veers off track, right? Those side topics that come in, again, just jot them down somewhere, assure them that you will get back to them at some point, and just keep summarizing those key points, trying to keep that discussion focused. So being an active facilitator, just guiding that discussion, again, using those questions, rephrasing questions that the kids are asking to maybe more open-ended, help to maybe just rephrase some of the points that are being shared to make sure everyone is clear on what it means, and then making sure that everyone, again, gets to talk and all those different perspectives are on the table for discussion, and being mindful of sharing your own personal views, right? Because those are going to have an impact on your students. Your students respect you, they look up to you, but we need to stay a neutral party in this situation. Summarizing and gathering feedback. So you've done all of this work to have this very deep discussion. So how do we wrap this up? So you've developed that understanding, you've had discussions, everyone's been heard, and then you reach this place and you need to end that discussion. So again, you're just going to take all of those things you've been summarizing along the way, talk about those key points, and you need to allow the students to process that information, right? Reflect on it in some way. And there are different ways they could do this. Maybe it's just writing something down, like what are the 3 things from this discussion that are going to stick with them, or what 3 things do they still want to look into? What do they still have questions about? Or maybe it's something where they can just sketch, right? Or just some way to reflect on all of this has happened and then process it. All right, so now we're going to look at some strategies. So what are some things we can do throughout this process to help the kids through this process? So we're going to talk about 8 strategies today that's going to help create that environment where all of your students feel empowered in your classroom. And these strategies are going to work for outside of these inclusive these discussions. So we're going to jump into this, add them to your toolbox. Some of them may already be there. So writing or drawing, we just talked about this. All students need different outlets to process information. So allowing them to express their ideas through writing or drawing before they do it verbally. So just as kind of like a planning activity, like we're going to share out as a group, we're all going to have something to say. What do you need to do to get ready for that? Another one, think, pair, share, very common, but very appropriate for this situation. So give them time to have their individual thought, their thinking, pair them up with someone, and then have them have a discussion and then share out to the whole class. What did they come with together? And you get all of that collective knowledge, those collective feelings heard, and it's going to help steer that discussion. Anonymous responses. So if you're really into a discussion and there are students kind of all over the place, and maybe there are just different feelings around the room, you could use a method if you have a little bit older students, like an online poll, or they could anonymously write something and just put it in a box. Nobody knows who did it. Pull those out and you can visit that information, maybe those questions, those wonderings, without anyone feeling that pressure of people judging them or criticizing them. So giving them time to reflect. And I know time in the classroom is a precious, precious thing. But if you're working through something important like this, they really need to be able to process it and reflect on what's going on. So providing some silent time, again, before you are wanting them to share out verbally, just to let them get their head wrapped around it, gather their thoughts, and be ready to have that verbal conversation with their class. The 5th one, structured speaking opportunities. So breaking speaking tasks into smaller, manageable parts might help build up their confidence. So if you're stopping at different stages along this discussion, maybe just ask them to think about a certain thing, or ask groups to think about different things, as having a smaller focus and then bringing that back together. So encouraging listening skills. So this is something I mentioned way back in the beginning of our webinar, of just some direct teaching of some communication skills. So listening skills don't always come naturally to students. So this is something that I've always spent time on in my classroom, where I directly teach, usually through modeling active listening. Like, you are listening to the words, you're trying to understand what they're saying. You're not just being quiet while they speak to be respectful. You are actively listening to what they are saying and trying to make sense of it, trying to make connections, right? And this will enhance engagement. And a lot of times I've seen this reduce anxiety because the students, they kind of come together when they feel like they're being listened to. It gives them a little bit of confidence to know that their peers are going to be listening to them with that same level of care. Small group discussions. So you can conduct these discussions. You can break them apart and put kids in small groups, have them really even try to develop some understanding together, like we talked about before. And this might help those kids who don't want to speak out in front of the whole group to maybe share some of their thinking in the small group. And then when you come back together, you will then be more able to have that full discussion where everybody's thoughts are on the table, everyone has been heard, because you gave them different opportunities to feel comfortable in sharing out what was on their mind. All right, so the peer support network. This is the last one I'm going to talk about. So establishing networks where confident students mentor their peers, creating a supportive community. So maybe you have some really strong students in your classroom who are really good at having discussions and listening and encouraging their peers to share. Try to mix up your students and get some different groups together to build up the confidence of the other students and have them work through some of these things that we've talked about today together, but in more of a supportive way where they're going to feel safe and supported in that environment. Okay. So another poll here. So Heather's going to help us out. Which of these strategies do you think would be most impactful with your students when working through these tough topics? We have the writing and drawing before verbally responding, anonymous responses, time for reflection, structured speaking opportunities, or those peer support networks.
Just giving it a couple more seconds.
Yep, thank you.
All right. Looks like 67% like anonymous responses, and 33% voted for time for reflection.
Wonderful. All right. Thank you. I'm just taking note of that. Thank you so much, Heather. All right. Wonderful. Yes. Both of those are very strong strategies in this given situation. Like I said, those strategies can work across the board in your classroom, but these, oh, I don't think you guys can see me, but these strategies that you guys had at the top of your list here are very strong ones because it creates that anonymous response, creates that safe place, right? Even if your classroom is a safe place on a daily basis, if we're talking about a tough topic, those nerves can start going, and those anonymous responses are really going to let you connect with all of those students and see how they feel. And then time for reflection, same thing. Like the students, this is a lot for them, and they're going to need that time to think about everything that's gone on and make some connections with it, hopefully, maybe ask some questions to get deeper into it, and then be in a place where they are able to just process this. All right, thank you for that. And then the last thing I'm going to touch on briefly is handling issues related to your identity. This is just something that we need to be aware of, right? Our awareness as teachers is always out there, but we need to recognize that some of these questions that are asked might get us going, right? They might have that knee-jerk response. They might bring on some feelings, and we just have to be prepared to manage our own emotions and reactions. That is a huge one. Just having that poker face on when we need to, so we're not giving away really just personal information about how we feel certain things. So just being aware, yeah, and managing yourself. All right, and I'm going to end with a quote. We can change the world and make it a better place. It is in our hands to make a difference. Nelson Mandela. And then Upcoming, our next webinar, it is called AI Ignite Learning, Unleashing Curiosity, Creativity, and Critical Thinking in Your Classrooms, the K-12 webinar coming up. And it's really going to dive into AI and how you can use it in your classroom and how you can get your students involved with it. There is a link here where it says next webinar, and you can link there to register, but this is on October 16th, and it would be really wonderful to see you all there. And then I just want to lastly say thank you. If you have any questions about what I talked about today, please feel free to reach out to me, and my email is right here. Thank you very much.